What's up, everybody? Ready for another deep dive? Sometimes I think about how much we think we know about our planet. But what if our mental maps are completely wrong? Like, when you imagine the North and South Poles, what comes to mind? Just a desolate wasteland of ice and snow. Maybe a few penguins and polar bears wandering around.
That's the perfect intro for today's topic because we're about to explore a theory that turns our whole understanding of Earth upside down, literally. Get ready for this. The hollow Earth theory.
Oh boy, here we go.
I know, right? It's a wild one. Basically, the theory says that Earth isn't a solid sphere, but a hollow shell with huge openings at the poles, a central sun inside, and even advanced civilizations living in this inner world. Crazy, right?
Pretty much.
Yeah,
Okay, so before we get too deep into this, let's talk about where this idea even comes from. You mentioned a book, right?
exactly. Our main source material today is A Terra Oca by Raymond Bernard. He basically compiled a ton of research from various explorers, scientists, and even ancient texts to build this alternative model of Earth.
Okay, so for everyone listening who's always up for mind-blowing information and those aha moments, this one's for you. We're going to break down this crazy theory and see what evidence the book presents.
We're going to keep it clear and concise, but get ready for some serious head-scratching moments.
All right, mission accepted. Time for a deep dive into the Hollow Earth theory. So first things first, what's the core concept here? What are the basic building blocks of this theory?
Okay, so the foundation of the hollow Earth theory is the idea that instead of a solid sphere with a molten core, Earth is actually a hollow shell with a super thick crust.
So like a giant empty eggshell.
Exactly. And get this. The access points to this inner world are massive openings at the North and South poles, like colossal doorways. Inside this hollow space, there's supposed to be a mini sun that provides light and warmth to this entire inner world.
A private sun for the inner Earth dwellers. Sounds like something straight out of a 50s sci-fi movie.
I know, but it's more than just a wacky idea. There are people who genuinely believe in this, and they base their beliefs on certain evidence and interpretations of historical events and scientific phenomena.
Okay, well, let's talk about the poster child for this theory. Admiral Richard Byrd. I know he plays a major role in this whole Hollow Earth thing. What's the story there?
Oh, yeah, Admiral Byrd is a big deal in the hollow Earth world. The book A Terra Oca highlights two of his expeditions, one over the Arctic in 1947 and another over the Antarctic in 1956. The core claim is that during these flights, Byrd flew thousands of kilometers beyond the geographical poles and encountered totally new ice-free lands that weren't on any maps.
Wait, hold on. Thousands of kilometers beyond the pole. Doesn't that seem impossible?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if Earth is a sphere, wouldn't you just circle back around?
That's exactly the point. Hollow Earth proponents use this apparent impossibility to support their theory. Instead of imagining Byrd crossing a fixed point called the pole and continuing to the other side of the planet, they interpret his journey as entering a massive concave opening at the pole, leading into the hollow interior of Earth. It's like the pole isn't a point, but the edge of a gigantic hole.
So instead of flying over the top of a globe, he's essentially flying into it. I also heard that the book quotes Byrd saying things like discovering a vast new land and calling his South Pole expedition the most important expedition in the history of the world. Pretty bold statements, to say the least.
Yeah, and those quotes are like gold for hollow Earth believers. They argue that these statements can't just be dismissed as like delusions or navigational errors. According to the book, Byrd's words only make sense if we ditch the traditional idea of a solid Earth and embrace this hollow structure with polar openings.
I mean, how do you explain discovering a vast new land that doesn't exist on conventional maps, right? So are they saying that Byrd literally flew through one of these polar openings and into this hidden world?
Exactly. And then, of course, the big question becomes, what happened to these supposed discoveries? Did they just get swept under the rug? I know the book also talks a lot about conspiracies and information suppression.
Oh, yeah, definitely. There's a whole section dedicated to the claim that Byrd's findings were deliberately suppressed by, like, secret government organizations after he made his initial reports. Like, it was just too mind-blowing and maybe even dangerous for the public to know.
Right, like top secret level stuff. But Byrd wasn't the only explorer to report strange things in those icy regions, right? There's got to be more to the story.
Yeah, the book mentions accounts from other Arctic explorers who encountered things that just didn't add up with the image of a frozen, uniform North Pole. Some reported warmer winds the further north they traveled, open water in places where there should be solid ice, and even sightings of plants and animals where there should be nothing but a frozen wasteland.
It's like their experiences challenge the conventional understanding of how the Arctic should behave. The hollow Earth explanation for these anomalies is that this warmth and open water come from the warmer interior of the planet, flowing out through rivers that empty into the polar regions. They even cite the discovery of tropical plant seeds and freshwater icebergs in the Arctic, which they say supports the idea of a different, more temperate ecosystem hidden inside. And remember that story about the explorer Nansen finding nothing but dust, dust, and dust in certain areas? They interpret that as volcanic dust originating from activity inside the polar opening.
Volcanic dust in the Arctic. This is getting weirder by the minute. Okay, so what about the magnetic poles? The book tackles that too, right?
Oh, yeah. The hollow Earth theory offers a very different perspective on the magnetic north and south poles. Instead of fixed points, as traditional science teaches, they are envisioned as giant circular rims like magnetic belts surrounding the polar openings. The shifting of the magnetic North Pole over centuries is used as evidence for this idea. They ask, why would it wander if it were just a fixed point?
So if this theory is true, no one has ever actually stood at the true geographic pole. That iconic photo of explorers planting a flag at the pole is just like polar fake news.
Yep. According to the theory, the geographic pole, the Earth's axis of rotation, actually exists in open air at the center of this polar opening, not on solid ice. They even explain the weird behavior of compasses near the poles dipping downward instead of pointing north as further evidence that the magnetic pole is actually the circular rim around the opening, not a specific point.
Compasses going haywire in high latitudes.
Yeah.
Okay, that kind of makes sense in a bizarre hollow Earth kind of way. So what about this central sun? How does that work? Is it like a mini sun just chilling in the middle of the Earth?
The idea is that inside this hollow Earth, there's a smaller sun that provides light and warmth for the entire inner world. And get this, they even claim that the Aurora Borealis and Aurora Australis, those mesmerizing light shows we see in the polar skies, are actually the glow of this central sun shining through the polar openings. It's like a little sneak peek into another world, or another world within our world.
The auroras as a glimpse into the inner Earth. That's a pretty poetic image, I gotta admit. Okay, so let's talk about life inside the Earth. The book mentions cities, advanced beings. Who are these inner Earthlings?
Now we're getting into the really fantastical stuff. The theory claims that highly advanced civilizations live within this hollow Earth, possibly descendants of ancient, mysterious civilizations like Lemuria or Atlantis, who sought refuge inside the Earth at some point in history. The book even mentions the account of a guy named Olaf Jansen in the book The Smoky God, who claims to have encountered giants with advanced technology in the inner world.
Giant tech wizards in the center of the Earth. This is starting to sound like a Jules Verne adventure on steroids. And does this tie into the whole UFO phenomenon at all?
According to the theory, absolutely. The claim is that these inner Earth inhabitants are the builders of those unidentified flying objects we see in our skies. They supposedly use a far more advanced energy source based on electromagnetism to power these incredible flying machines, and their reason for observing us. Primarily concerned about our activities on the surface, especially our development of nuclear weapons and pollution of the atmosphere.
So the aliens we've been searching for all this time are actually our downstairs neighbors worried about the mess we're making. Now, that's a plot twist.
I know, right? It's pretty wild. The book even mentions accounts of people who claim to have had contact with these inner Earth beings, describing them as wise and peaceful. But there are also claims that they're not entirely truthful about their origins, sometimes posing as extraterrestrials to throw us off their trail. And they even go into detail about the supposed social structure of a place called Agartha, with unbelievably advanced science, a unique separation of the sexes, and even a form of reproduction called parthenogenesis.
Parthenogenesis, for those who don't know, that's basically reproduction without the need for males. The level of detail in this theory is impressive. But going back to the conspiracy angle, does the book provide any concrete examples of how this information was supposedly suppressed?
Oh yeah, definitely. They dedicate a whole section to the claim that there's a secret group within the government, possibly connected to something called Special Group 5412 within the U.S. National Security Council, that's actively working to conceal the truth about UFOs and the hollow Earth. They even mention the CIA's involvement in this whole cover-up operation. One specific example they give is the alleged suppression of the December 1959 issue of Flying Saucers magazine, which apparently exposed Byrd's discoveries in a more explicit way.
Magazines vanishing, secret agents. This is like a Cold War spy thriller. And what about the whole Antarctica and UFO connection? How does that fit in?
Right. The book also mentions encounters with the infamous Men in Black, who supposedly interfered with investigations into UFO sightings in Antarctica. It's all meant to reinforce the idea that there's a coordinated effort to keep any information about strange happenings in that region, which they believe is a major entry and exit point to the inner Earth, away from the public eye.
Okay, so if this idea is so out there, does it have any echoes in ancient cultures, in myths and legends that have been passed down through generations?
That's actually a fascinating connection the book tries to make. It draws parallels between the hollow earth theory and myths and legends from various ancient cultures: Chinese, Egyptian, Hindu, Inuit, Irish, Scandinavian, you name it. They all have stories about mysterious openings in the north and advanced races living inside the earth. They even suggest that mythical figures like Quetzalcoatl and Osiris could have been visitors from the inner world in ancient times, arriving in Vimanas, which they claim are ancient flying saucers.
Quetzalcoatl arriving in a flying saucer. Now that's a creative interpretation. What about those legends of underground tunnels and cities in South America, like the ones in the Roncador Mountains in Brazil, or Colonel Fawcett's relentless search for a lost city?
Those legends are also brought up as possible evidence. The idea is that these tunnels could be secret passages leading to the inner world. And Colonel Fawcett's disappearance, while searching for those lost cities, is presented as another mystery that could potentially be explained by the existence of the Hollow Earth.
All right, so let's talk about official science for a minute. How does the book address the scientific ideas we all learned in school, like the molten iron core of the Earth?
Official science, always the elephant in the room. Well, the book attempts to counter mainstream scientific arguments in a few ways. Regarding the molten core, they claim that this idea is just an extrapolation based on indirect evidence, like seismic wave analysis, and that the Earth's overall weight actually suggests a hollow interior. They also challenge the notion that temperature increases continuously towards the center of the planet, suggesting that this increase is limited to the Earth's crust due to radioactive activity.
Okay, but what about gravity inside this hollow Earth? How come we wouldn't just, like, float off into space or fall into the central sun?
Their explanation for gravity in a hollow Earth is quite interesting. They argue that the mass of the Earth's crust is what attracts objects to both its outer surface, where we live, and its inner surface. This gravitational pull from the crust keeps everything stuck to the inner and outer walls, including the central sun, which would essentially be floating in the middle of this hollow space. In other words, we wouldn't fall into the central sun because the gravity of the crust would pull us inwards, towards the shell.
It kind of makes sense within this whole crazy framework, but I'll admit my head is spinning a bit. Back to the UFOs, does the theory really claim that they all come from inside the Earth?
Yes, that's one of the core conclusions. They argue that UFOs are not spacecraft from other planets, but highly advanced atmospheric vehicles built by the inhabitants of the inner Earth. They even use the significant increase in UFO sightings after the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombings as a key piece of evidence, suggesting that they came to observe and maybe even intervene in our use of nuclear technology.
So our own nuclear threat might have triggered these visits from the interterrestrials. It's like a sci-fi movie with an environmental message.
Exactly. And the UFO sightings in Antarctica are also used to support the idea that the polar openings are the main entry and exit points for these craft. They emphasize the supposed advanced technology of the inner Earth inhabitants, including their mastery of free energy and anti-gravity, and even try to explain the incredible maneuvers of UFOs, those sudden accelerations and decelerations, through the concept of an electromagnetic anti-inertia field.
Free energy, anti-gravity. It's a lot to take in. So to sum it all up, what are the key takeaways from this hollow Earth theory as presented in the book?
All right, so the main pillars of the theory as presented in the book are: Earth has a hollow interior accessible through massive openings at the North and South poles. This interior is illuminated and warmed by a central sun. There are continents and oceans in this inner world, inhabited by technologically advanced civilizations, and the unidentified flying objects we observe are actually vehicles of these inner Earth civilizations who are closely monitoring us.
That's quite a scenario to ponder on those sleepless nights. And for those of you listening, what kind of mind-boggling questions does this theory raise for you?
This theory really challenges us to reconsider a lot of what we've always taken for granted. Could ancient mysteries, like the strange behavior of compasses near the poles, or countless legends about hidden lands, have completely different explanations than we think? If advanced civilizations really exist inside our planet, what are their motivations? What could we learn from them? And what if the big secret about UFOs isn't about beings from other planets, but about something much closer to home, literally beneath our feet?
These are questions that make us rethink our place in the universe, and even on our own planet. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's one final thought-provoking idea to leave our listeners with?
Here's something to chew on. If this vast new land, larger than all the continents combined, really exists within our Earth and its discovery has been intentionally hidden from us, what else might we not know about the world beneath our feet and the skies above? That's your cue to keep exploring this fascinating theory and maybe dive even deeper into this ocean of possibilities.
Guys, see you in another podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel.